The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Okay, so you went to school with President Barack Obama.
Yes, I was lucky enough to be one of his classmates from 5th grade on.
And he was known as Barry back then.
Right, Barry. And, really he had a great personality, but was one of us. I mean, he was one of many kids, didn't necessarily stand out from an academic standpoint that we knew of, but was actually quite bright and tried to hide it behind a veneer of cool. He was actually extremely good in terms of English and history and politics and economics, but again, just had a very, very casual weight about him.
And he still does have that casual feel. Now, in terms of the classes that you went to, what classes do you remember him being in and participating in?
I think AP U.S. History was one of the strongest memories I had of him, because we used to type our papers together in this little corner office in the library. He would take file cards and type his entire paper just from these file card notes, and but again, he was very understated, and he's also changed a lot. I mean, while all of us who grew up and knew him want to think that he's the Barry that we know, we also have seen and clearly understand that he transformed quite dramatically in college and in graduate school and since then.
So socially, President Obama, who did he run with? What was his crowd like?
Well, he had, again, people who were just like him, very cool and really really good people. I mean, the types of kids who would really go out of their way to help a new kid or to help people feel comfortable. And, he still is extremely close to those people. And a lot of us who are his classmates actually knew him socially, but not the way his tight group does, and they still do. And that's what makes us, just as Americans, I think, really appreciate him as a president, because he still is very bonded with those same people and very loyal to them.
Now, he recalled struggling a lot with his racial identity when he was in school. Did you see that struggle, or was there a lot of racial situation that permeated through the school?
I think when you look at Hawaii in general, you've got so many different racial groups, and we all were struggling, I think, with different types of angst that we didn't even recognize in each other. And that's the one thing that I think, almost to a person, we were kind of surprised at. It made us relook at our whole high school experience. But honestly, I think we've always known that Hawaii is this mixture of races, but African Americans were not widely populating our schools. They were mostly located in the military families. So that was really, I think, an eye-opener for us, because African Americans in our school really blended in with the rest of us, and it made us more sensitive to the fact that they really were a very small minority of the population. Our school was really a mixture of Asian and white and mixed kids. So I would say, though, that there were very few African Americans in that mixture.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did Barack Obama have a lot of girlfriends? Because he doesn't talk a lot about it in his book. He said he actually struggled to get dates. Do you recall that?
I think he really was one of those guys that, so many people really, really liked as a person. And I think that socially, a lot of us were really not very adept at, dating or things like that. So, I'd say that if he ever asked someone, I'm sure they would have gone with him in a heartbeat. But seriously, I mean, he was just a really great person. And I think, again, he's changed so much since those days. So I can't say as a classmate that I intimately know him, but I can say that, he was a great, great person from the very beginning, and he's evolved tremendously into a great president.
Now, do you remember him dating? If he had asked you out, would you have said yes?
Again, any of us would have said yes, but honestly, he was really one of those people who you wanted to know, you wanted to be around. He had this very great way and gracious way about him, and he was also really, sort of balanced in a lot of ways. He had a self-knowledge and a maturity that I think we might not have recognized at the time, but certainly when you look at his poetry, when you look back at the stuff that he said or did, there is very much a very mature soul there.
He loved to play basketball. and I know he played on the varsity. Was that a big part of who he was, an athlete?
Yes, I mean, I think especially at Punahou, where athlete scholars are really nurtured and highlighted, he was very proud of that, and we were very proud of him for that.
And he said he experimented with pot and sometimes cocaine. Was that an issue in the school? Were drugs something that was predominant then?
Especially, I think in the late 70s in Hawaii, drugs were available, and I think whenever you have a private school where kids might have more access, you're going to see more of it.
Mm-hmm. And politically back then, did you see any trace of his democratic leanings or any sort of kind of liberal leadership?
Well, you know, we had an incredible background at Punahou because we had an instructor who wove global understanding and perspectives of all countries throughout our entire curriculum. His name was Siegfried Ramler, and he had been an interpreter in the Nuremberg trials. So he wanted to make sure that everything we did, whether it was in Christian ethics or history or literature, really wove together all these perspectives of different religions and different countries and histories. And I would say that we all really benefited in having a global view that way. And I'd say when we first started to hear, you know, Barack's policies and the president's stance on different issues, it made us so proud to hear a global voice. And that's what we saw, you know, growing up. We were very lucky to have that.
So you're saying the curriculum kind of lent itself to more of a global view, a world view that you think Obama is encompassing in his policies today?
Well, I'd certainly say that he and his family really embodied that in the beginning, whether Punahou added a lot to it or not. But I can say that in particular, the Punahou curriculum in the 70s was extremely focused on building global citizens. That was the goal.
And the clique that he rode with, were those mostly comprised of athletes, black, white, Asian? Describe his crew.
I'd say, you know, you've got a real mixture because there was no way you could have a group in Hawaii and from Punahou who wasn't basically a mix of, you know, ethnicities and also athletes and folks who might not have been so athletic but who were, you know, very active in class.
And do you remember anything about his family life? Because I know his father left and he was with his mother and his grandparents.
There were several memories I think that we all had that were very strong, and one was when his father came to speak to the fifth grade class. Really, everybody sort of was in awe of him. He came in a suit. He came from the East-West Center. He was very, not only professorial, but we all thought that, you know, here was, he felt like an ambassador or, you know, a statesman. So that made a big impression, I think, on all of us. I know his grandparents were extremely supportive of him and really were the ones, you know, that we saw on campus. But I'd say more than anything, his close-knit group of friends, really close-knit group of friends, knew his family much more than any of us ever did.
What do you remember that his father spoke about to the class?
It was actually about Kenya, and you know, it imbued this sense of, again, this worldview, that there was a world outside of the United States and a different perspective that started to resonate with what we were being taught.
Now, last question. There was that controversy about his birth certificate. When you heard that, how did that make you feel when everybody was talking about that?
I thought it was the most ridiculous debate I'd ever seen because all of us who were born in Hawaii at that time have the same birth certificates. If you happen to have kept the original one, which is a very thin, extremely blackened out piece of paper with, you know, it's very fragile. And what was even funnier was that our classmates, we have twins in our class, they were born right before him. Literally, their numbers in that hospital were right before his, and their mother knew the doctor who delivered him. So we all felt that that was an extremely sort of useless debate and wished that America hadn't gone there.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.